This is the Mariana Trench, and along its edge, the fish still look normal. But go a little deeper, and it's like their bodies are assembled by a different set of rules. Eyes, bones, density, everything feels off. The deeper you go, the more monsters you see. If the environment can reshape life like that, then something down there is pushing harder than cold and darkness combined. And it has to be a force that acts constantly, not randomly. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the pressure is about 1,086 bar, over 1,000 atmospheres, so what surrounds you isn't just water, it's almost a solid load pressing into tissue, cells, and the chemistry of life itself. So why does this crushing force create monsters instead of turning the deep into a graveyard? A very, very flat graveyard. If the pressure down there is constant, there's really only one way to survive. You can't fight the pressure, you have to be built for it from the start. Otherwise, every molecule in your body ends up working against you. Below roughly 19,700 feet lies the ocean's deepest zone, where the pressure isn't just high, it's extreme. Hundreds of atmospheres. By about 36,100 feet, it climbs toward 1,000 atmospheres. For most organisms, that's a brutal filter. If you're not adapted, you simply can't function, and the species disappears long before it ever reaches the bottom. But here's what's even stranger. Pressure doesn't start breaking fish only right down at the seafloor. Even at around 0.6 miles deep, they often already look different, even though that's not what we normally call the truly deep ocean. If pressure increases by roughly 1 atmosphere for every 33 feet, then at 3,300 feet, the body's dealing with around 100 atmospheres. A load that basically changes the rules of chemistry. Under that kind of pressure, ordinary surface species start to have all sorts of small but crucial system glitches. For example, cell membranes stop behaving normally, and proteins, which have to fold in a very precise way, start acting up. And if they fold wrong, the whole organism loses stability. Why is pressure dangerous to cells if it doesn't crush the body like it can? Because inside a living organism, everything depends on delicate tuning. Proteins only work in a specific shape, and that shape is held together by weak interactions and by the way water behaves around them. If outside pressure forces molecules to pack more tightly, those settings start to fail, and enzymes lose efficiency even without any visible injury. Deep sea species counter this with chemistry. Their tissues accumulate compounds that help stabilize proteins and keep cells functioning at extreme depth. Here's another weird thing. The deeper you go, the more often fish aren't firm at all. They're soft, almost mushy, as if nature is deliberately taking the stiffness out. If a dense skeleton were the perfect defense, you'd expect the opposite: more depth, more strength. But down there, rigid structures become an unnecessary luxury. The pressure outside and inside the body mostly balances out, so the advantage isn't a shell, it's flexible tissue and saving energy. That's it! I can't do this anymore! This seems fine. In many deep-sea fish, the bones really are less mineralized, with a smaller share of dense salts, and that makes the body lighter and softer, not because they're weak, but because they're built to survive under a different set of rules. Why don't bones snap under that kind of pressure? And why would an animal reduce calcium if the skeleton is its support? Because the deep ocean rarely breaks a body mechanically, like a factory press. Water's almost incompressible, and the fluids inside the body are too, so the pressure's applied evenly without the kind of uneven squeezing that cracks rigid parts. When the real problem isn't the bones will get crushed, but the fact that every cell has to spend energy maintaining a dense mineralized framework, the choice makes sense. Basically, when food is scarce, deep-sea species are better off building the cheapest skeleton they can and saving their energy for something more important. But here's what doesn't add up. Near the surface, a swim bladder's almost a fish's default superpower. Yet in the deep ocean, many species lose it, as if the body willingly tosses out a perfectly useful tool. If there's gas inside, rising pressure will inevitably compress it according to basic physics. The volume shrinks, buoyancy becomes hard to control, and any up and down movement turns into a gamble because the volume can change fast. That's why many deep-sea fish have a very small swim bladder or none at all, not because it's unnecessary, but because a gas-filled cavity under hundreds of atmospheres becomes a bad bet and an expensive problem to manage. Okay, no gas. So how do they stay suspended in the water and not sink like a rock? If the bladder's off the table, you're left with a simple density rule. Either you're heavier than water and you drop, or you make your body's density almost the same as the surrounding water so you can hover without constantly working your muscles. A lot of deep-sea fish reduce their effective weight not with air, but with chemistry and body composition. They store fats and make their bodies more watery, sometimes even partly gelatinous, so they're closer to the density of the surrounding water. It looks bizarre to us, but down there, that kind of softness is a way to save energy, instead of spending your whole life constantly fighting to stay neutrally buoyant. Otherwise, they'd have to work non-stop just to avoid sinking. Even birds have an easier time. But there's one more detail. At around 1.2 to 1.9 miles below, many fish develop eyes that look disproportionately large, as if vision matters more than anything else. If sunlight's almost vanished, those eyes can't be just for looks, which means there are still rare signals down there that make good eyesight worth the cost. At these depths, the main clue isn't the sun, but other creatures' flashes. Bioluminescence remains the ocean's working language. Brief bursts of light lure, scare, conceal, or give away the movement of prey. So the eyes don't grow to admire the underwater world, they grow to catch single, faint glimmers and not miss the one chance at food or the warning of danger. But then why does the opposite happen in other deep-sea fish? Why do their eyes shrink or disappear, like the body's giving up? If there's no reliable source of light, vision becomes an expensive toy. It's a large organ, it's nervous tissue, and it costs energy to maintain nonstop. In an environment where there's almost nothing to see, it's smarter to invest not in eyesight, but in senses that always work. Chemical cues, vibrations, and direct contact with water.
Steve, where are you? I can't see.
Don't panic, just keep vibrating. Down in the depths, many species really are partly or completely blind because evolution cuts what doesn't pay off. It's not degeneration, it's a redirection of resources towards senses that still deliver information in total darkness. But here's another surprise. The deeper you go, the fewer abrupt changes there are. Down there, the temperature and conditions are almost always the same. Up near the surface, the ocean lives in pulses, day and night, storms, seasons, warming, cooling. But down there, it's like time stops. So what's the news?
You won't believe it. Some ship sank down here.
Seriously? When?
Like recently, in 1856.
And since deep water barely mixes with the surface, those swings in heat simply don't reach it in any meaningful way. And the whole environment turns into a refrigerator that runs the same way all the time. At depth, the temperature usually stays around 36 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit and barely changes compared to the surface. That's one of the main reasons everything works differently down there. Life isn't built to adjust to the seasons, it's built around permanence, slow living, scarce meals, and a steady cold that never lets go. So why does the cold make the fish look even stranger and more frightening, even if the pressure part already makes sense? At about 36 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit, life can't run at surface speed. Reactions slow down, tissue repair takes longer, and growth stretches into years instead of months. When metabolism slows, a species doesn't just move more slowly, it changes its whole strategy. Fewer sudden bursts, fewer wasted calories, more waiting and patience. That's why deep-sea fish often grow slowly and live longer, and the mix of slow development, low activity, and unusual body proportions creates this eerie sense of ancient. Like it's not a modern animal at all, but a survivor from another world. Here's another thing that feels weird. So many deep-sea fish have mouths that are way too big. Isn't that overkill? I mean, why are they that huge? When food is scarce and shows up randomly, you can't afford to be picky. The chance of running into something edible might be rare, and missing that opportunity is too costly. So it's smarter to have a mouth that can take not just the perfect prey, but anything that can fit. That's why deep-sea predators often have comically oversized jaws, and their mouths are built to handle a wide range of prey sizes. It's not aggression for show, it's insurance against an empty world where the next meal might not come for a long time. So why isn't it enough for them to just grab the prey? Why do they also need a stomach that can stretch to a ridiculous extent? Because down there, food doesn't arrive on schedule. Today, there's nothing. And tomorrow, a big chunk of organic matter might suddenly fall, or prey might swim by, and that could be your only real chance for a long while. If you've caught it, you need to take in as much energy as you can right now, or you'll end up as the next piece of carrion yourself. And in some deep-sea species, the stomach really can expand dramatically, letting them swallow prey that looks far too large for their body. Yeah, it looks absolutely horrifying, but it's really just a survival mechanism in a world where food is almost never available. But here's the other key thing to understand. In the ocean, darkness isn't like a normal night. It's a gradual shutdown of the light spectrum, layer by layer, until at a certain depth, sunlight simply stops existing. Since seawater absorbs different wavelengths unevenly, the long waves disappear first and the surface loses color one by one until only the most penetrating shades remain. Red light fades within the first few dozen feet, and below roughly 3,300 feet, there's practically no sunlight at all. Past that point, day and night stop meaning anything. After that, the only light left is what the organisms make themselves. Rare bursts of bioluminescence and a faint suggestion of shadows from something moving through total blackness. So where do those flashes on the ocean floor come from if there's no sun down there? If light still shows up, then the source isn't astronomy, it's chemistry. The organism makes its own photons because that beats living completely blind and invisible.
Seriously, how much longer? When are they finally going to run electricity down here?
In the deep ocean, bioluminescence is so widespread that light isn't some rare miracle, it's a practical tool. Some species use it as bait, others as a signal, and some to confuse predators or hide their outline by lighting up their bellies. So the darkness isn't empty, it's full of quick flashes, and almost everyone has a job: food or survival. But here's what doesn't add up. The anglerfish's lantern looks like a headlamp, yet in total darkness there's not much to look at. And if light is a resource, you don't burn it for no reason, so it isn't for the fish itself, it's for the ones who want to lure closer. In deep-sea anglerfish, that glowing stalk works as bait for prey. In a world where there are miles of emptiness all around and chasing someone down is too expensive, it's smarter not to hunt but to make the prey come to you. The fish hangs almost motionless in the water column, saving energy, while that point of light does the one thing that matters at depth. It creates a target, something that another creature swims toward. After that, it's all about jaws and a lightning-fast strike from short range. I wanted to do a little anglerfish skit here, but it was already in Finding Nemo, so let's not repeat ourselves. Okay, but if they need to reproduce, how do fish even find each other in all that darkness? If encounter rates in the open ocean are low, then the biggest risk isn't getting eaten by a predator, it's never finding a mate at all. So evolution has to solve the meeting problem first. In some deep-sea anglerfish, a tiny male, once he finally finds a female, bites onto her. Their tissues fuse, and he becomes a permanent source of genetic material while some of his organs gradually shrink away.
These are not codependent relationships. Don't listen to them, sweetheart. We love each other, okay?
It's insurance against the void. You meet once, you lock it in forever, because a second chance might never come. And here's another thing that's fascinating. It sounds logical that in a world of crushing pressure and cold, you'd need brute strength. But a lot of deep-sea fish actually have low muscle mass. When food is scarce and the low temperature keeps metabolism slow, any extra muscle becomes a daily expense, something you have to pay for every single day, even when nothing happens around you for weeks. So it's more advantageous to have a body that barely needs fuel than a body built to move fast for a long time. In many deep-water species, muscle is genuinely reduced because their strategy isn't active pursuit, it's extreme efficiency, plus short, decisive bursts of action at exactly the right moment. On land, we call that a depressive episode. Deep-sea fish aren't weak. They're optimized for an environment where constant power is a luxury and survival favors the one who can wait and not waste energy. But there's one more detail that really stands out. A lot of deep-sea fish have teeth that look downright monstrous, like the abyss itself has remodeled their jaws. When prey is scarce, the biggest mistake isn't missing, it's letting go of what you've already got. So the mouth has to work like a trap. There's an entrance and almost no way back out. Many deepwater predators have teeth that angle inward, so when prey jerks, it only forces itself deeper into the throat. That isn't performative cruelty, it's hunger engineering. Up near the surface, you can lose a fish and find another a minute later. But down below, a single loss can mean weeks or even months of waiting. By the way, have you seen Steve?
No, why? What happened to him?
That's why those teeth aren't for killing. They're there to make sure you don't lose your one shot at a meal. A huge mouth doesn't automatically solve anything if the skull is rigid and won't actually let you swallow something big. When prey are rare, you have to be able to take whatever shows up, even if it's larger than you. And that's only possible under one condition. The head has to work like a set of movable parts. So evolution tends to loosen stiff joints and add mobility in places where, on the surface, it might look like a drawback. In many deep-sea fish, skull elements are connected less rigidly, and the jaw system is built to open extremely wide and function like a capture mechanism. This isn't a deformity, it's a design for the rules of the deep. Random prey, instant grab, swallow it because there's no second chance. That's why it's not just the mouth that changes, it's the entire architecture of the head. Otherwise, it'd be awkward. You open your mouth, but the prey can't fit through the skull. And here's the part that seems illogical. In an extreme environment, you'd expect the brain to be bigger because there's more adapting to do than near the surface. But in many deep-sea fish, it's actually smaller. If the brain is expensive tissue that constantly needs oxygen and energy, then in a world with scarce food and slow metabolism, it becomes a heavy burden. So the survivors are the ones who keep only what truly pays off. Basic navigation, tracking scent, reacting to vibrations, simple hunting tactics. That's why many deep-water species really do have smaller brains relative to body size because their environment doesn't demand a complex map of the world or non-stop processing of bright signals. Down there are few objects, few events, and little light, and the cost of a smart brain is higher than the benefit. It's not stupidity, it's energy-saving mode, where every calorie matters. I'm not dumb, I'm energy efficient. I've got a certificate. Also, here's something else I've been thinking about. In total darkness, color shouldn't really matter, yet a lot of deep-sea fish still have colored skin. So it must serve a purpose, right? When the only light comes from sudden bioluminescent flashes and the occasional glow of someone else's headlamp, even the slightest glint can give you away from far off. And in the ocean, distance can decide how an encounter ends. In those conditions, it's better not to blend into the background, but to snuff out as much incoming light as possible. Some deep-sea species are so dark that they absorb most of the light that hits them and reflect almost nothing, which lowers the chance of being spotted. It works like an anti-reflective coating. Don't flare up in someone else's flashes, don't reveal your outline, don't become a target before you even realize there's something nearby. In a world where light is scarce, the ability not to reflect it becomes a form of armor. Some deep-sea fish have almost no scales, and at first glance it looks like they've ditched their most basic armor. Near the surface, scales work like a protective shield against bites, parasites, and constant scraping, but in the deep ocean where life moves more slowly and direct impacts are rarer, the armor can cost more than it's worth. In that setting, flexibility and saving materials can beat carrying heavy protection just in case. For anything to bite you, it first has to find you. For many deep-sea species, the outer covering really is reduced, and the skin is often softer because the main threat down there isn't non-stop attacks, it's an energy shortage. Scales take resources to make and maintain, including minerals, and in a world where calories show up only occasionally, the body cuts anything that doesn't pay off immediately. So instead of a shell, you get a body that's cheaper to maintain and easier to keep running under cold temperatures and crushing pressure. It may look vulnerable, but in their environment, it isn't. Is there even a hard limit to how much a fish can adapt? You can keep going deeper, ditch the swim bladder, make tissues softer, cut energy costs, but at some point, a normal fish still starts to fall apart. When pressure climbs into the thousands of atmospheres, the issue isn't bones or mechanical crushing anymore, it's that the biochemistry of surface species stops being stable. Proteins, cell membranes, and osmosis all have a breaking point, and past it, the body simply can't function properly. Fish have been documented at depths beyond 5 miles, but then the range drops off sharply. Around 5.2 miles down begins a zone where living as a fish becomes almost impossible. It's not a lifeless place, it's a boundary specifically for vertebrates. And if there is a boundary, then the record holders should be living right up against it, and they show us what life looks like on the edge. The deepest confirmed case is a snailfish filmed at about 5.18 miles deep. Scientific records also include a confirmed capture at roughly 5 miles. It's a fish engineered by pressure and cold just to remain a fish in a place where almost no other vertebrate can make it through. It even kind of looks like a fish. Well, if you use your imagination. Why do fish at extreme depths look less like monsters and more like soft jelly? And why does that seem like a weakness? I'd argue with that. When the pressure is extreme, rigid cavities and any hard engineering become a liability. You can't afford hollow spaces inside, and you can't build a body like a framework of solid bones. Down there, resilience isn't armor, it's the ability to handle compression evenly and avoid weak points where something can fail. That's why snailfish and other deep-sea animals often have soft, water-rich tissues and reduced mineralization. It's a way to spread the load and maintain neutral buoyancy, not a sign of fragility. In water, where pressure comes equally from every direction, jelly often survives crushing forces better. So depth can make animals softer, but not necessarily more breakable. It pushes them to remove risky cavities and ditch rigidity when it gets in the way of survival. So who lives deeper than fish if vertebrates have basically reached the ceiling down there, or more like the bottom? If fish run into hard limits like biochemistry and energy costs, then the niche gets taken over by creatures that handle pressure more easily and don't have expensive systems like a big brain or complex buoyancy control. So deeper down in the abyss, invertebrates dominate, animals that can survive on carrion, tolerate crushing pressure, and capitalize fast on rare meals. At extreme depths, the main players aren't fish at all, but amphipods and other scavengers. They're the first to swarm a bait, they gain mass quickly, and they can live in conditions that push fish right up to the edge. Fish might disappear, but the ecosystem doesn't. It simply reorganizes, favoring the creatures for whom surviving under this kind of pressure is easier and cheaper. That's it. I'm not going any further. Later, losers! But if the deep seafloor is dominated by invertebrates, why don't we see the usual marine lineup of shelled animals, snails, and other mollusks that are everywhere in shallower water? At great depth, water chemistry starts calling the shots. The higher the pressure and the lower the temperature, the more readily the ocean eats calcium carbonate. Down there, calcified structures simply don't preserve as well. Carbonate dissolves faster, and building a thick shell becomes more expensive and risky. That's why in the most extreme depths, organisms without heavy carbonate armor often have the advantage, and living in a shell stops being a perk and starts being a liability. Why did the Mariana Trench become the symbol of the edge of the world if the ocean has lots of trenches? It's simple. If there's anywhere that should represent the absolute limit of pressure, cold, and darkness, it'd be the single deepest place on Earth. The Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench is considered the deepest known point in the global ocean at roughly 35,800 feet down. There's no special water and no regional mysticism here, it's just the planet's geometry. This is where the ocean is thickest, so the conditions push closest to the extreme, where every extra foot is one more step past what normal life is built to handle. Why isn't that depression just an empty pit then? If it's merely the deepest spot, you'd expect life down there to be sparse. But seafloor shape changes the ocean's economics. If the bottom is more like a trench than a flat plain, it starts collecting things that currents would otherwise sweep away and scatter over a wide area. Depressions really do work like traps. Organic matter, marine snow, and carrion are more likely to settle and build up on the bottom than on the surrounding flat seabed. That doesn't mean food is abundant, but it does make it more concentrated and more predictable in one place. Whatever falls from above has a better chance of ending up right in the trench. So the greatest depth might not be empty at all. If anything, it can be the spot where a scarce resource pools and the whole ecosystem organizes itself around it. Everyone keeps telling me, "Steve, move up closer to the surface. There's sunlight up there." But look, down here it's calm, the neighbors are quiet, and the food? Oh, look, a whale. Want to know what feels truly monstrous in ecosystems like these? Your gut says the predators. But a lot of the time, the real driving force is simply how rare food is. When meals don't show up often, any big drop of biomass turns into an event that feels like a celebration and a war at the same time. One huge burst of energy can instantly rewrite the local rules of life. That's exactly what happens with a whale carcass sinking to the seafloor. The so-called whale fall can support entire communities not for months, but for decades. Scavengers gather fast, and from a distance, the scene really does look like a monster attack. But it's not chaos or mindless aggression, it's a normal ecosystem mechanism. Rapid recycling of food that's both rare and incredibly valuable. But how did this food sink start reshaping things, turning ordinary fish into monsters? If nutrition arrives not steadily but in sudden bursts, the winners aren't the fastest hunters, they're the ones that can capitalize instantly on a rare opportunity. So body shape stops serving looks and starts serving one rule: see the resource, take it right now. That's why down deep you so often find huge mouths, expandable stomachs, trapped teeth, and mobile jaws. Basically a contest for the creepiest underwater creature. Winner gets a dead whale. The deep doesn't create monsters on purpose, it creates conditions where life can actually work down there. And that's why the farther down you go, the less an ordinary fish resembles the fish near the surface. The surface doesn't teach you to live by the rules of hunger and the occasional lucky feast, the deep does. So why don't fish hunt like normal predators, fast, active, chasing things down? Because when it's dark, cold, and food is scarce, active hunting becomes a gamble with massive expenses. In trench bottoms, temperatures are usually around 34 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and in that cold, the metabolism and overall pace of life are different. So deep-sea predators often hunt by saving energy. Lure with light, creep in the dark, make one sharp strike, then freeze again. At the surface, hunting is about speed. In the deep, it's about surviving without burning calories you can't replace. That's why their movements can look lazy. But it's not laziness, it's energy efficiency. But there's another weird detail. Some deep-sea animals have transparent skin. In places where there's absolutely no sunlight, color stops working like a language. You can't be seen, you can't attract anyone, you can't scare anyone off, and you can't blend into the background. Except for the times you snuff out all light and become blacker than black. So pigments turn into a cost that's hard to justify when energy is already at rock bottom. Down there, appearances often get simpler because there are fewer signals to send. Either you make your skin dark so you don't reflect someone else's flashes, or you don't waste resources on pigments at all and stay pale or semi-transparent. The resources go into pressure-proof biochemistry, sensor systems, and survival, not into coloration that, in the dark, almost nobody needs. Okay, but then how come each big trench has its own lineup of creatures, as if it's a standalone universe? The deep should follow the same rules everywhere: crushing pressure, cold, darkness. If the conditions are equally brutal, you'd expect the same universal set of animals to survive, just in different places. So it's not only about the physical conditions, it's also about how isolated these places are and whether newcomers can even reach them. Deep-sea ecosystems really do behave like islands. Trenches are separated by thousands of miles of shallower depths and by ridges, and for pressure-adapted species, that journey is basically an impassable border.
You know, I've always wanted to travel, see the world, meet other fish, try different foods.
Then you'll have to climb over that mountain over there. Yeah. So, as they say, east or west, home is best, right? In the end, populations stay apart for ages, rack up differences, and become endemics, because isolation works the same way it does on an archipelago. The climate can be similar, but different islands produce different species. That's why a trench doesn't just generate weird forms, it can also produce its own local families that exist nowhere else. Like amphipods, the most successful animals on the seafloor. The moment food shows up down there, they're almost always the first to arrive. It's like they have priority access. If life at the bottom is a race for a rare resource under crushing pressure, the winner's the one that's tough, not picky, and able to eat fast before the chance disappears. Amphipods fit that find, carrion, take as much as possible, survive until the next one lifestyle perfectly, and that's exactly how they operate. In deep trenches, they can gather in huge numbers and start tearing into food immediately because their bodies and behavior are built for pressure and cold, and their diet doesn't require perfect prey. They don't wait for perfect conditions, they make conditions work for them, turning any scarce bit of organic matter into a rapid feast. Here's what doesn't add up. Amphipods have an exoskeleton. Under that kind of pressure, shouldn't it crack or at least get chemically damaged at depth? The thing is, amphipods down there don't just survive, they dominate. If a normal shell is supposed to degrade, then they must have a specific trick that protects the body surface in that extreme water. In the deep-sea amphipod Hirandelia gigas, scientists have described a thin gel-like coating of aluminum hydroxide on the exoskeleton. It's linked to life in ocean trenches and, according to studies, may help protect the animal in high-pressure conditions under the harsh chemical constraints of the deep. This isn't aluminum armor in some Hollywood sense. It's a real chemical film the animal forms from ions available in seawater. And that's the whole point of the deep. It's not the strongest that survives, but the one that can rework even its shell to play by different rules. But even in the deep, you still find truly large animals, though hunger, logically, should push everything toward smaller sizes. If cold water slows metabolism and stretches life out, growth can take years. Not fast and dramatic, but slow and steady, as the animal hangs on until the next chance to feed. In some deep-sea groups, scientists really do describe deep-sea gigantism. There are oversized isopods, amphipods, and other invertebrates, though it isn't a universal rule for every trench. It's an ecological effect. Cold temperatures, a slow pace of life, and the feeding schedule can sometimes allow animals to grow larger, but only if they can survive long, empty stretches and capitalize on rare feasts. But then why doesn't everything down there become gigantic? Imagine a blobfish the size of a whale. Because when food is scarce, being big isn't a perk. It's a bill you have to pay constantly. More tissue means higher needs and a higher risk of dying between the rare deliveries from above. So gigantism only works where an organism either gets a relatively steady energy supply or can endure long periods of hunger without falling apart. A trench doesn't scale up everything indiscriminately, it filters for whatever can match the lifestyle. For some, that leads to a big body. For others, it leads to small size and efficiency because a smaller organism is easier to feed and easier to keep alive through lean times. What's also important is that many animals living in deep ocean trenches look ancient, as if the ocean hid a museum of the past down there. When the environment barely changes, always dark, consistently cold, and under constant pressure, evolution doesn't need to roll out new upgrades every season the way it does at the surface, where everything swings and shifts. So some traits can stick around for a very long time simply because they work and nothing comes along to replace them. That stability makes them seem ancient. An animal may look primitive or weirdly put together, but it isn't a living fossil. It's a modern organism that seems unfamiliar because its job isn't to fit into our world, it's to survive in a world that offers almost no new signals except hunger and pressure. So they seem ancient mostly because of how they look, not because they're literally from the past. So why does Monster cling so stubbornly to the Mariana Trench? It's insanely deep and pitch dark. Who else would you expect down there? Rainbow ponies? Sure, it's all a matter of perception. If your brain is used to recognizing a proper animal by familiar proportions, normal eyes, a normal mouth, normal flesh, then anybody built under different rules automatically looks like a mistake. In that sense, monster isn't a biological description, it's our reaction to something that doesn't match our template. Reality is both duller and scarier at the same time. These shapes weren't made to frighten humans, they simply survived in a place where pressure, darkness, and hunger have gradually stripped away everything that worked on the surface. So the word monster says more about people than about fish. We're seeing adaptation, but we interpret it as a threat because it breaks our sense of what a body is supposed to look like. There are no monsters in the deep. There's precise tuning to an environment where you can't afford to be wrong. But then why is it the Mariana that became the main monster factory, if trenches exist all across the ocean and many plunge miles down? Mostly because the Mariana Trench is the deepest and the most famous in pop culture. It gets filmed more submersibles have visited it, and it's talked about more. But the same forces are at work in other deep trenches too. Pressure reshapes life, hunger selects for certain strategies, and isolation produces endemic species. You owe me a like. See you later.